Hi, my name is Chaviva Wimsat. I'm a senior identity and access management engineer, and I work for Instrumental Identity. Today, I will be doing a presentation on adding SMS capabilities to IdentityIQ. Overall, we will be discussing a little bit about instrumental identity. We will be looking at the different use cases this feature would be useful for, talking about the flowchart from a high level for both the AWS and Azure solutions, looking at code examples for both of those, going through a demo, and also, if time permits, we can talk a little bit about registration for those cloud services. And that would be the end of the presentation. Instrumental ID focuses on helping clients with the full stack development of the identity and access management lifecycle. We like to focus on any part of the identity process, and we like to tackle any kind of hard problem that comes our way. And we like to have innovative solutions, especially through any kind of plugins or any kind of add-ons. We like to come up with new ideas that maybe are niche or things that are just not out on the market. We started coming up with this feature because we noticed that there were issues with people, or I guess people within our clients who are not necessarily used to using SailPoint directly. So let's say within the operations space, if you have people who are not used to using the SailPoint client directly, maybe they're business people and they are end users who have an identity and would need to be informed about something, but they don't actually use SailPoint directly very often, and so they're not used to interacting with the UI, or they're not very familiar with how the tool works. They may need specialized notifications. And that is a use case that started this particular feature. So we broke this into 4 different examples. One of them can be identity proofing. So in the account creation or birthright process, needing to have a user set up their password or help them create an account, especially in the very beginning when the user doesn't have very much information. A lot of times you're only starting off with having a phone number, which makes this incredibly useful because you will be able to send that user a message and verify directly in SailPoint that the user got the message, which we'll see in the demo. In the operation space, for example, sometimes there are very specific people who can troubleshoot task failures, or sometimes tasks are specialized and certain people need to know when something breaks or fails. So having special escalation paths set up so that people get notified via text when something fails is another use case that also covers escalations, but there can be other escalations as well covered for that. For example, outside of task failures and escalating that, you can also have an escalation if someone if there's an account lockout, or if there is a termination of someone that is important. Like, for example, if for some reason the CEO of a company got terminated, that's probably something that you would want to look into from a security perspective. So that would be a specialized text message that you can have set up. And I wanted to emphasize here that while Instrumental ID does like to build plugins because of their ease of use in SailPoint, this particular feature can be ran as a rule or a plugin, and you will also see that in the demo. So to walk through the flow chart, the diagram on the left is where I will start. So there are two different pieces of code we will be looking at, but they both have very similar logic. The first thing is going to be receiving the connection properties. The next thing will be constructing the message in the sense of the actual object to send the text. Next will be connecting to your cloud service of choice. For the demo purposes, we will be looking specifically at AWS and at Azure. And then we will be sending the message and receiving the result. There are lots of different ways you can do error checking, and you can collect specific information for auditing and things of that nature. You can also hide like the user's phone number or hide other user information that you don't want, let's say, help desk representatives to be able to see. And all of that stuff can be added on top. For the purposes of the demo, we wanted to keep the code very simple and easy to understand, but just know that more features can be incorporated into this. Something else that I wanted to point out, just because it is important, is the NIST 863B, which is specific to CISP, is that when accounts are being set up, a lot of times systems are built to only notify via email. However, there needs to be at least two different notification methods for proper security measures, and that could be achieved via SMS messaging. So now to look at the main function for AWS, I broke this up into steps of 1 through 4, and I broke these blocks up into 1 through 4 as well. The first block is confirming that the user has a proper capability to actually send the SMS messaging. And in this case, we have those capabilities as system administrator or SNS full access or SNS message full access. And to add some clarification, I wasn't exactly sure when was a good time to explain this, so this is a good time. SNS stands for Simple Notification Service, and that is different from SMS. It is not a typo, despite what it may look like. The reason for that is because AWS loops in the ability to automate emails and to not automate text messaging and also other notification types in the same services. And that is why it's like simple notification services rather than just SMS. The next section is to authenticate into the SNS client. Next, it will build the message object, and it will send the text message and return the result. We will look at this in a little bit more detail when we get to the demo section in the actual repository. The Azure side is very similar. It is also slightly a little bit more complex. So first it's going to attain the connection details and set the sender on the message object. Next is going to ensure that the message has the minimal property set. As I explained earlier, you could add more or less error checking depending on your needs. It's going to then connect to the SMS client endpoint, and then it is going to collect the result details and send the message. So now I'm going to go over to the product demo. Let's see. So first, before I actually demo, I do want to pull up the code again and just look at it in a little bit more detail. So this one is the AWS example. And the reason why I wanted to pull this up is just because in the slides, it's just a little bit more difficult to show the full picture of the code example. I really only was able to show the main function. So this is a full code example for AWS. So in this example, this send message function for AWS, everything is included in this main function. So there's not much here that is missing. The only thing that you really couldn't see is what was included into it, the way that the Java file is set up, the post API that's being used, but that is out here. And secondarily, let's see. Secondarily, we also have the Azure version as well here. So the Azure version works with the SMS client builder rather than the SNS. And they use different libraries, but they essentially do the same thing. And the reason why I wanted to point that out is just so that you know that regardless of what your underlying cloud user infrastructure is, you could still achieve SMS messaging with SailPoint on top. So now for the actual demo. This is Instrumental Identities SailPoint implementation for the purposes of the demo. You will notice that we have other plugins that we have built set up, and so our implementation may look different than what an out-of-the-box SailPoint implementation would look. For example, we have a rule runner plugin, a history viewer plugin, a SailPoint shell query plugin, and a deploy plugin. So for this demo, we're going to be using the rule runner plugin. So this plugin helps a developer write and test a rule directly in the UI. It is essentially like an IDE directly inside of SailPoint. And some of its features is that you could import rule libraries directly from this dropdown here. It has some tools. You could also browse the job docs live while you're in here. And it's very useful if you especially are getting started in IAQ and you are still writing some of your rules and you need to test things out as you're writing it. So I wanted to also point out that the send test message, although it does underline as an error, it is not actually undefined. That is simply just because of the way that this is written. You will see that it does actually. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so you can see that when you click run, it does actually send the message. So to walk through how this actually works backwards, um, we are getting my identity here, and then we are getting the attribute number. So the reason why we are doing that is so that my number is not displayed publicly, and we are sending the message like hello from Wool Runner plugin, and then we are calling the send test function. So what I had did before is I had pulled in the demo SMS, but it doesn't exactly make a difference because this is imported as a plugin. So if you go here, let's see, first actually, we're gonna go to debug and review the, we're gonna review the rule. So let's see. So in send test, what we are doing is calling the SMS or SNS, sorry, simple notification service class, which is a custom class that we developed for this demo. We are putting the number in the message into this function, and we are then calling send message, which is specific to the plugin, and then we're returning it as a result. So the reason why this rule is written this way is because this is actually set up as a plugin, but we wanted it to be used as a rule and as a plugin, and that allows it to be used interchangeably. There is not a lot of configuration settings, but you could see here that this is our AWS plugin. And again, all of the underlying code is here. So once all of this compiles and builds, this will get compressed into a zip file, and all someone has to do is load that zip file into their system locally. So I actually have a local build of this plugin on my machine. And the way that I did that is by installing Docker and running it locally. So for example, here you could see in my SailPoint IQ Docker, if I run docker compose up -d, you see that all of my containers are still running. And also, if I wanted to go into SailPoint, from just my local machine, I can also do that. As you see, it says localhost and 8080 in my browser. So in the same way, you see we have the drop-down IDW plugins, and we also have the rule runner plugin, and we have, again, the same code here. So this is just another example to show that even if you don't have a complete SailPoint instance running, you could still even run this locally and test it out locally as well. Let's see. And in terms of actually building the plugin locally, in this case, the simplest way to build it would be with Ant, but there are many other ways that you could build it. Or actually, first, what I'm going to do is just clean it. And you could see here that, let's see. Yep, there is no more build directory. And then now if I package it, it now has made the AWS plugin 1.0.zip. Now, if we go back to the demo instance and look in debug, if you look at the plugin object of the AWS instance, you'll see that it is the same version. So that is how someone would build this locally and update it locally. And in order to install the plugin, all you would have to do is go to the gear, go to plugins, and drag and drop to install. So it's already installed, so I'm not going to do that, but that is how simple it would be. It essentially is the same as compiling it locally, drag and dropping it, clicking configure. In this case, it's already configured. Making sure your endpoint and your region is correct, clicking save, and then you'd be able to test it out. Okay, so just to briefly cover the registration process for end user messaging, there are essentially 4 steps. First, you have to create a phone pool, which essentially is a collection of sender IDs that provide failover in case a particular phone number becomes unavailable. That is a very extreme case that you probably wouldn't encounter unless you were using a phone number for customer support and it got very, very busy. Next, you could optionally create a configuration set that could handle rules for if there was, for example, delivery failure. That's not required. Uh, AWS does provide a sandbox environment for you to test out text messaging. I think that this is particularly helpful because if you are trying to implement SMS and you're not sure if there's a problem with your implementation somewhere in the SailPoint side, or if there's a problem, particularly on the AWS side, you can start off by playing around in the sandbox and just making sure that you have everything set up on the cloud side first. And then you could, at the end, configure it for production. The Azure process is essentially the same. They also both cost $2 a month if you're going to go the toll-free route. One thing that I do want to point out about this particular demo is that we chose to only have a one-way phone number, essentially meaning that our phone number can only send messaging. We could code this out to have a lot more features, such as being able to handle receiving messages back. You could have automation around receiving codes such as press 1 if you want these options, or 2 for this. There are definitely services I have been a part of where I've gotten text message options like that in the past. And it's really nice to see that that can be automated in directly to SailPoint. So, for example, looking back at the use cases we talked about earlier, someone could say, oh, this task failed, press 1 to rerun it, or press 2 to automatically open up a ticket in ServiceNow. And that is just another way that this could be expanded. The registration process for Azure is very similar to that of AWS. The only thing that I wanted to point out that I didn't get to mention earlier about the demo is that we chose to use a one-way phone number, a toll-free number. However, you could have a two-way phone number and you could handle lots of other use cases with that. For example, if you wanted to code the program to receive a text message back and handle that message. For example, if you did have a task failure and you wanted the admin, for example, to be able to send a code back to SailPoint telling SailPoint to restart that task or to open up a ServiceNow incident for that task failure. Those could be things automated into the program as well. So those are some use cases that were not previously discussed, and that just gives you some ideas for how this product could potentially be expanded. And that is the end of the presentation and the demo. Thank you so much, and I hope that you enjoyed learning about the SMS capabilities that we have come up with.